All right, hey guys, we are going to continue going through lesson 2.5, which we started in class yesterday. So please make sure you have out that resource page along with your calculator and a pencil. Make sure you are filling it in as you are watching. If you ever need the teacher to pause, if I'm going too fast, please just ask the teacher to pause the video for a second. So yesterday we were talking about absolute value equations and we learned how to solve them. So remember, most absolute value equations have two solutions. Some can have one, only if it has equals 0, and then some can also have no solution. So just as a quick refresher, we did this whole first page together, so you should have this completed. And now we're going to go to the back. All right, let's start with letter C on the back. So yesterday we had talked about we need to isolate the absolute value symbols and get those by themselves. So to do that, we're going to get rid of everything else that is with them, essentially. You always want to undo adding and subtracting first. So I am going to subtract 4 from both sides. Okay, that zeroes out here. I've got 3 times the absolute value of n plus 1 equals 9. All right, we still need to isolate the absolute value of n plus 1. So I'm going to do the opposite of multiplying by 3 and divide both sides by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1, so I get absolute value of n plus 1 equals 3. So now, this is very important what I talked about yesterday. If you look inside here, remember I always put my hand up on the board and I said pretend to cover that up. Inside here, we want this to figure out, hey, what could be inside here so that it's an absolute value of 3. Well, inside here, this could either equal 3, I want this to be 3, or I want it to be negative 3. So I need to figure out, well, what could n be? So that inside here's a 3 or a negative 3. So I'm going to write 2 different equations. I'm going to say, hey, inside there, that n plus 1, when does it equal 3? Or when does it equal negative 3? And then I just solve those from there. So if I go ahead and solve that, I'll subtract 1. I end up with n equals 2. And then on the other one, I'm going to subtract 1 as well. And I end up with n equals negative 4. So my 2 solutions are 2 and negative 4. All right, let's take a look at letter D. So same thing. If I look at that one, I guess I didn't need to draw my line down. The absolute value symbol is already by itself. Okay, so I've already got this over here by itself. So I want to know, well, what could I put inside here so that the absolute value of it is a negative 1? So I want you to think about that for a second. Okay, so if I'm plugging numbers in, let's just say I put like a 2 in it. I've got 3 times 2 is 6, minus 4 is 2, absolute value of 2 is 2. If I plugged a 3 in, I'd get 9 minus 4 is 5, it's 5. Think about if I plug any number in there for x, am I ever going to get a negative value? No, I am not. This cannot just equal a negative over there by itself when you are done. So there is no solution possible that would ever give me an absolute value of negative 1 here. So you can write it like this, no solution, or you can put that symbol, which also means no solution. All right, letter E, go ahead and draw your line down. So again, first thing you need to do is you want to isolate this absolute value. So I need to get rid of that dividing by negative 2. So the inverse of dividing by negative 2 is multiplying both sides by negative 2, or negative 2 over 1. So if I multiply and divide by negative 2, that makes a 1. So I end up with the absolute value of 3x minus 1 equals negative times a negative is a positive 8. So now, again, remember kind of the cover-up method. So inside here, I need to figure out, wait, when does this equal 8? Because the absolute value of 8 is 8. Or inside here, what could I plug in for x? So this equals a negative 8, because then the absolute value of negative 8 is also 8. So I have to set up my 2 equations. Okay, so I'm going to say, hey, when does 3x minus 1, when does that equal 8? Or when does inside there equal negative 8? Then I'm going to solve it. So I'm going to add 1. I get 3x equals 9. Divide by 3. I get x equals 3 is one of my solutions. The other one, I'm going to add 1 to both sides. That zeroes out. I get 3x equals negative 7. And then if I divide by 3, I end end up with x equals -7/3. And again, I can just leave it like that. So now if I went and plugged those back in, the original equation, which we did yesterday, if you plug that back in, the original up here, they should work. Or they will work. And that's how you can check to see if that you're correct. All right, we have one more. Let's do letter F. Okay, so again, draw your line down. And remember, you need to get this by itself first. So I have to get that isolated before I can even think about solving it. So I've got adding and subtracting with that 5 up here. So I'm going to, that's a positive 5. I'm going to add in a -5 to both sides, or subtract 5. That's going to cancel there. Now be very careful. There's still that negative sign out in front of there. So I've got negative absolute value of k minus 2 equals -2. All right, now some people might see this -2 over here and be like, oh, no solution. But that is not correct because I don't have this isolated over here yet. I've got to get that by itself. There's a negative sign out front there. So remember, that's like there's an invisible -1 outside there, saying -1 times that. So I need to get rid of that negative sign out front. So I'm going to do the opposite of multiplying by -1 and divide by -1. And this is just one way to do it. That makes a positive. So I just have the absolute value of k minus 2 equals a negative divided by a negative is a positive 2. So now your goal is to figure out, hey, what could I put in for k here so that inside there it equals 2? Because if this whole thing was 2, then it would have an absolute value of 2, or -2. Because if that whole thing was -2 inside there, that would have an absolute value of 2. So I'm going to do, when does k minus 2 equal 2? Or when does k minus 2 equal -2? Draw my line down and quickly solve those. I'm going to add 2 to both sides. I get k equals 4. Add 2 to both sides. I get k equals 0. And remember, 0 is a number, so you can have 0 for a solution. So those are my 2 solutions. Again, you could plug those in to make sure you're correct. But for time's sake today, we're not going to plug them in. All right, so then our last type of problems that we're going to see are these word problems. And if you were solving this, I would probably not even write an equation for this, but I want to show you this because it's something that you may see sometimes in ALEX or on a forward test or on the ACT. So again, if you just read this problem and we're trying to solve it, you could just do it without doing like much work at all. So it says, depending on the size of each song, Luna's phone holds an average of 2,000 songs. Give or take 250 songs. So give or take, somebody asked me this yesterday, that just means like above or below 250. So 250 more and 250 less. It says write and solve an absolute value equation to find the maximum and minimum number of songs her phone can hold. Well, you could probably just figure that out in your head. If it can do 250 more than 2,000, well, that's obviously 2,250. And if it can do 250 less, you would just do 2,000 minus 250, which is 1,750. Okay, so you can come up with the solution very easily. The hard part is writing an absolute value equation for that. Okay, so I can already fill in the solution. I know what the maximum is, 2,250, and the minimum is 1,750. But now I'm going to show you how you can write the equation. So first thing, it says define the variable. Well, we don't know the maximum or minimum number of songs. So we're going to say let x equal the max or min number of songs. Okay, so I'll start by doing that. All right, and this part might get a little confusing, so I'm just going to do this one with you, and then we'll do another one on Monday when I'm back. So to write the equation, you know it's an absolute value equation. If you're trying to find the difference between songs, just like if you're trying to find the difference between temperatures, like 200 degrees and negative 250, you can actually subtract those. You can do 200 minus negative 250, or you can do negative 250 minus 200, and you can take the absolute value of those to find like the difference between them. And we talked about that earlier with absolute value. So you can do the same type of thing here. So I don't know the maximum songs, minus the original is 2,000 songs. So the difference between those two, we want to equal 250. Okay, so now if I'm thinking about this, I'm going to think in my head, well, when inside here, when does that equal 250? So I can set up two equations. When does x minus 2,000 equal 250? Or inside here can be negative 250. X minus 2,000 equals negative 250. Okay, if I solve those, I could add 2,000. And you guys can do this pretty quickly. I get 2,250. And over here, if I add 2,000, 2,000 take away 250, which is 1,750 or 1,750. So there's how I can get my two solutions. Again, I would never do this if I was just trying to solve this problem. I would just be like, oh, just add 250 and subtract 250. So you can easily get your answer. I'm not going to assess you on writing this equation because I know you know how to solve it another way, but you might see some of those just as an FYI. We are going to skip this one and save it for Monday when I am back. So now what you're going to do is your substitute teacher is going to hand out a homework practice sheet that you can work on. The rest of the time is yours to work. This is due on Monday, so make sure you complete it. If you have questions, I did leave an answer key so you can kind of check out my work to see how I did some of the problems. If you have other questions, just let me know and I can help you on Monday.